In this video, we'll talk about coercion and voluntariness during police interrogations. At this point, we all know what Miranda rights are. If you're in custody and being interrogated, the police officer must give you Miranda warnings. It is the right to remain silent. It is the right to have an attorney present during the interrogation.
How many hours do you want?
Now, despite what you see on TV, it's not when the person is being arrested. It's really during custodial interrogation. So you have to have both custody and interrogation in order to hear those warnings. But despite what we tell our clients never to speak to the police, people still do. So what happens when an individual gets the warnings, waives them, and then proceeds to confess during the interrogation? Does that confession automatically get into court? Or should we look at other things? And the answer is that we should look at the voluntariness and due process, coercion of the interrogation. And that's exactly what we're going to do in this case. The facts of the case prior to the confession are not super important, but I will tell them to you just so you can get a picture of what's going on. Shane Young is being pulled over for swerving on the highway. He doesn't initially pull over, so he keeps driving. Eventually he stops his car, jumps out, and starts running away. The police chase and eventually wrestle him to the ground and arrest him. They search his body and they find nothing in his pockets or anywhere. But they find about 4 grams of methamphetamine close by. They later walk all the way back to the car and they find a backpack that was thrown over the fence, and in that backpack there's about 94 grams of methamphetamine. What's important in this case is the confession and the interrogation of Mr. Young. Now, 4 days after his initial arrest, an FBI officer arrives at the local jail. He introduces himself to Mr. Young and tells him that he's there to interview him. Now, the first thing he does is reads Mr. Young his Miranda rights. So he tells him he has a right to remain silent, he has a right to have an attorney. And Mr. Young, just like so many people, waive his rights. He tells them that he's willing to answer questions without an attorney present. So they proceed. And here's why the next confession becomes involuntary according to this appellate court. When the agent began to interrogate Mr. Young, the first thing he told him is that the agent was there as a friend. He was on Mr. Young's side, which was not true. He also showed him that he had a federal warrant signed by the judge for Mr. Young's arrest on the drug charges. Now, he decided to tell him more. Instead of saying that he spoke about the case with the United States prosecutor about bringing the charges, the agent went further and he told him that he had a good relationship with the judge and that he told the judge about Mr. Young's case, and that if he was truthful, he could literally buy some time off of his sentence. Every truthful statement would have ticked away some time from the ultimate sentence imposed by the judge, which were not true statements. This particular agent never spoke to the judge about the facts of the case. And that's not how the federal system works. It doesn't just tick away the time from your sentence simply because you're being truthful. The agent also told Mr. Young that the sentence that Mr. Young was facing was between 5 to 10 years, and it primarily depended on how much cooperation he was going to provide to the agent. Now, we know from the video that I posted last week, I'll post it above here so you can review it, the length of time that somebody's facing in federal custody really depends on the quantity of drugs. And so if we have to explain to an individual how much time he's really facing, that really depends if that person is charged with simple possession, distribution, the purity of meth. Are we talking about pure methamphetamine or a substance? All of those will really change the maximum penalties that an individual is facing and how much time he's ultimately going to receive from the judge. So what the officer was telling Mr. Young was simply not true. Once we deem the officer's conduct coercive, we then have to look at the person being interrogated. Did he have any kind of impairment, physical or mental, that made him more perceptive to these pressures? And in this case, we didn't have those issues. The point of this video is that we shouldn't stop at Miranda. We should always look at involuntariness and coercion in these interrogations. This topic is very fact-specific. So if you feel like you were pressured to confess, you should really speak to your attorney about your confession. Because chances are, if you feel the coercion, the question is, did it rise to the level that it violates the Constitution? If you enjoyed this video, please click like, subscribe, hit that bell notification button so next time I post, you'll be first to know.